Thank you for attending today's AccuTrade webinar presented by The Shop, powered by FordDirect. Presenting today will be Brian Kramer and Grant Goring from AccuTrade. If you have questions during the presentation, please type them into your webinar toolbar. Brian and Grant, over to you.
Okay, so I'll take it away. I appreciate everybody joining today that's on the call. We're going to be talking about empowering profitability, scaling used vehicle acquisitions. Here's the agenda for today. We're going to talk a little bit about AccuTrade. We're going to talk about the current market disruptions, empowering your teams with an appraise anywhere philosophy to scale your appraisals 2, 3, or 4 times more. What makes technology, or what technology enables the most accurate appraisal values? We're going to dive into service drive acquisition at the end, and then we're going to close it out with Q&A. So I'll start it out like this. You know, we always need a point of reference or an anchor point. So you can see on this screen, this goes from 2017 to 2025. It's the most recent J.D. Power NADA data from the automotive forum at the New York Auto Show. And back in 2020, there was 16.2 million 0 to 5-year-old used vehicles. As we start getting into the post-COVID years, which is going back 3 years, and we're kind of at the peak of it right now in 2024, and we're only going to get a little bit tighter in 2025, as you can see. We've gone from 16.3 at a high in 2019 to 2025 at 12.7 0 to 5-year-old used vehicles. So those 0 to 5-year-old used vehicles are at a premium. They're the ones that turn the fastest, they generate the highest margin, but on some makes and models, it also can be the most volatile, depending on EV supply issues, days on market day supply, MSRP changes with certain brands like Stellantis. And then throughout this presentation, we're going to focus specifically on a lot of Ford and Lincoln product and how we can help dealers to avoid a lot of the volatility that's going on in the market today.
Hey, Brian, one question for you. I think for the group here, it's obvious that the new car production declines during COVID have led to this, but what other changes in the industry are causing more trouble in sourcing used vehicles?
Well, right now, and we're going to cover it here in the next few slides, is you've got the disruption that's coming from, Carvana, CarMax. You've got Tesla. Tesla is changing the way that everybody is looking at used cars. So with Tesla, Rivian, Lucid, they're not so concerned about whether or not they're taking in a used vehicle the way that Ford dealers are. They're selling easy online and instant, and they don't care if you sell your car to CarMax or Carvana. In some cases, they encourage the consumers to. They're also harnessing data in unique ways. They're finding alternative revenue streams. If they're selling insurance, other aftermarket products, accessories, but they're using first-party data and over-the-air updates. So as they're grabbing franchise dealers' first-party data, whenever they're going to, let's say, CarMax, Carvana, now they're able to retarget and market back to your clients. And like with Tesla, if they bought a car 2 or 3 years ago, they're still in that ecosystem to be targeting them again to trade out of that Tesla. So these are different ways than just EV, the EV, how many people want to buy it versus not buying it. The way that they're going about disrupting the industry, I think, is really interesting. And then you've got digital transformation disruption. With Ford, for instance, Ford dealers are reinventing a 121-year-old business model, going head on with disruptors, with maybe, Tesla, Rivian, they start off the blank slate, so they don't have to deal with a lot of supply chain issues and a lot of the challenges that Ford dealers have to tackle. So we're going to address that over the next few slides.
Brian, one of the things that we talk about here at Curse Commerce is the automobile business is going to change more in the next 5 years than it has in the previous 100. And we've seen disruption across multiple industries. Maybe you can tell us a quick story.
So thanks for the tee up there, Grant. So recently I was in New York and I was meeting up for a meeting with a very large volume Honda dealer up in Queens. I get in about 1 o'clock in the morning and there's a bunch of taxi cabs on the left-hand side. And obviously I want to support local businesses. So they're all asking, hey, where are you going? I'm going to Freedom Tower. How much is, I'm asking how much it's going to be. And I see this big crowd on the other side of the aisle which those are all the people waiting for Ubers and Lyfts. So as they're telling me, they go, hey, it's going to be somewhere between $80 and $120. And I said, well, how about we just do 100 and let's call it a day? No, I can't do that because you never know in the traffic. It's going to be this. And I said, okay, well, how about we just do 120 and we just call it at that? Well, no, because I don't know what it's going to be once we get there. And if we have to, if anything comes up. And the moral of the story is that it was just too much decision fatigue and it's too much energy, which is what all these people over here are doing. So all of these people are paying more than they would pay to the taxi cab driver for convenience and reduction of friction. And you can see the demand. And if we can go to the next slide, the disruption that's happening is they're selling easy, online, and instant, Uber versus yellow cab. And that's what consumers want. So there's a lot of disruptors that are using this to disrupt franchise dealer models and taking that and using it as their advertising platform. They're taking used inventory share. There's only 15 million used vehicles that are going to be replaced this year. There'll be 38 million used vehicles sold, but 15 million that are not sold for sale by owner or peer-to-peer. And then a lot of these other disruptors are attacking the stereotypes with multi-million-dollar campaigns to create a perception that it's easier to sell a vehicle to them than it is to a franchise dealer.
Now, Brian, these disruptors, whether it's the CarMax or Carvana, they've been around for some time, but what's been the impact on the industry?
Well, CarMax has acquired 1.1 million cars from consumers doing it this way. And last year they sold 1.3 million vehicles, but they sold those through wholesale and retail channels. So if you take a look over to the right, they're really getting aggressive online. 70% of their CarMax consumer appraisals, the acquisitions originated online. The interesting thing is that prior to 2020, CarMax wasn't giving online appraisal values. You had to come into the dealership and physically, get the vehicle inspected. Now you still have to today, but they're going to at least give the consumer a value for the trade prior to arrival. And then they have so much confidence in their active trade appraisal process that they're going to put their best foot forward. And then they're going to make sure that every single one of the appointments that got a trade value online, when they arrive, they're going to go out with the customer and they're going to walk around it and do an active trade appraisal like we should do every time. The result and what happened when they did that, as you can see in the bottom left-hand corner of this purple square, 95% increase of used vehicles acquired from 2020 to 2021. What was the difference? They flipped a switch on their online appraisal and they got serious about it and connected the two. For 20 something years, they were acquiring, it was 700,000 vehicles year after year after year for 25 years. And then all of a sudden they flip the switch on this and they double it in 1 year. That's the appetite and that's the consumer demand and that's how consumers want to transact. Now, the interesting thing is, as they acquire 1.1 million cars, almost 10% of the total vehicles that are going to be replaced this year, they retailed 765,000, but they wholesaled 546,000. Similar percentages to what we see with Carvana. So what's the moral of the story here? You should give every single consumer a value. You should leverage technology. Technology is not the biggest disruptor in automotive retail. The biggest disruptor in automotive retail is failing to give consumers what they want. And as a former dealer of 27 years and a dealer operator of 19 years, I know that if you don't give customers what they want, somebody else will. And the dealerships that I was involved with was a Lincoln dealer, a couple of years ago. We learned very quickly that it's not about the brand, it's not about the client demographic. I was in Naples, Florida, which isn't exactly, a tech hub, but we found that most of the clients that we were working with were happy to do everything online. We just had to remove the friction and give them what they wanted.
So Brian, as we think through this, I think everybody on the call has a couple of key common goals, right? We all want to sell more cars. We all want to buy more cars. We all want to be more profitable. So what's the key to really selling more cars?
Appraising more cars.
So how do we do that?
If you want to sell more, you need to appraise more. And you need to be able to appraise anywhere. You can't just limit yourself to appraising in the showroom. You've got to be able to appraise. Well, we'll go over all the different channels, but you got to simplify the appraisal process. And this video right here was at NADA 2 years ago with Automotive News. And really I bought multiple vehicles in less than 2 to 5 minutes, and it's not about a race of, some pit crew as to how we do it, but it's about making it so easy that people transact, because by the time they get to the end of the process, they don't, they're surprised that it was that easy and the price was that competitive. So here's a quick video. Brian Kramer, EVP at cars.com, general manager of AccuTrade. We're about to walk outside and see if we can get somebody to sell us their car. Would you at least give me the opportunity to appraise your vehicle, just so I can tell you what it's worth? Okay. And this is how fast you can appraise a vehicle with AccuTrade. So what I'm going to do first, you don't even have to get out of the car. I'm just going to scan the VIN number. How many miles do you have on it? We've got a proprietary OBD tool. I'm going to plug it into the vehicle. It's going to tell me everything about it. When it turns green, it's already populating our appraisal. We'll take a few pictures. By the time I make it all the way back around, I'll tell you what the vehicle's worth. We're just appraising this vehicle live, right? We're trying to do it in 2 minutes or less. It's in really good shape. So cosmetically, the only thing wrong with it is a small dent, which should be paintless dent removal. Now it's time for the big reveal. That's $34,325. Wow. That was right? That was right. Is that more than you thought? Yeah. That's what everybody says. Thank you. And that's
So Brian, let's talk about that for a second. What is it that enables the appraisal to go so quickly?
So it's very intuitive, so intuitive that my 12, now 13-year-old can appraise cars with it. And it's basically just point by numbers, but the data that's behind it and the pedigree of what's powering this appraisal system. It starts with GALVs, which is what Robert Hollins had acquired, but it's actually the data of all of our transactions on the RH Hollinshead side. And just so everybody knows the kind of the pedigree of AccuTrade, the same team that created AutoTrader Traded Marketplace, created KBB ICO. Think of this as version 3.0 of that. And we'll talk about what makes our values different. But I would say that the point and click and the simplicity of the user experience on the app is what makes it so intuitive, and it makes it it's so easy that by decentralizing it, you can have salespeople, you can have service advisors, you can have valets appraising cars, which I know sounds a little bit crazy, but it literally is that simple.
So Brian, as we think through the speed of the appraisal, right, and the accuracy that comes with it, we know that in order to sell more cars, we need to appraise more cars. But how do we track, or how do we understand what a good job is? Maybe you can talk a little bit more about that.
So as you and I travel around the country, we see that most people, if I ask them, what's your win rate percentage or your look to book in the showroom, everybody has a good handle on what that is. But then it starts to change a little bit when we go to sight unseen appraisals, when we go to dealer website leads. And by dealer website leads, I mean people that are trying to buy a car online, instant offer third-party leads, service drive appraisals. And what should that total win rate look like as a percentage? Everybody knows that on a showroom appraisal, that should be 45%.
Yeah,
if you're
but
running on all cylinders.
Question, Brian, how many dealers actually sit down and break this down, and how difficult is it to do?
Well, if you don't have the tool, obviously AccuTrade, helps dealers do this for them. But if you're not counting sight unseen appraisals, or you're marking them as purchase appraisals, or you're not baking it into your total, the recipe of what you're trying to do to acquire vehicles, you're really limiting yourself. And it's very similar to when we didn't count internet leads as real opportunities, right? And that's just something else. Prior to 2005, let's say, we just didn't quantify it. It was something that was unknown, and we didn't track what's the appointment set rate, the show rate, and all of those things that we know today that we're supposed to do. And what we've done at AccuTrade and Cars Commerce is that we've been able to quantify exactly what these percentages should be. And ironically, as we were talking to some other experts in the industry that have worked for CarMax and other places like that, or publicly traded groups, we know that showroom appraisals should be 45%, but what should the percentage be on sight unseen appraisals? What's a good job? And the number.
Brian, you brought up something. You brought up the internet. right? And I think it's important to go back 20 years ago when we looked at this as kind of just this thing we had to do, right? The evolution of leads coming over via fax machine and now into internet. And when we think through what customers are doing online, it's no different than ordering an Uber or a Lyft from your phone as you exit the plane. They're looking for speed, they're looking for transparency, and they're looking for information, right? So that they don't have to go back and forth with a cab driver. And that kind of leads us to where we're at here, right? Most of our customers are coming to us in a digital sense. They're trying to answer 3 questions when they're online. Is the car I want available? How much is my trade worth? And can I afford it? So when we're dealing with one of those 3 variables, right, that fit into the whole digital retailing workflow, the trade is probably number 1. So with AccuTrade, what we do is we take that 17-digit VIN and decode all the pedigree information. And we get that either via license plate or a VIN number, not just a year, make, model. And then our proprietary data will help that customer receive the best offer up front in seconds, not minutes. But it goes beyond just a website widget. What about your marketing campaigns? What about salespeople's business cards or a service advisor's desk? You now have the ability to create Google Analytics trackable QR codes that link back to that same appraisal workflow. And really what this tells us is that we need to be omnipresent with the customer 24/7, 365 at 3 a.m. or 3 p.m. We need to deliver the exact same experience. And that includes information quickly and accurately. Now, there's some risk in that. The more opportunities you have to appraise cars, the more risk you're inviting. So every car that you appraise with AccuTrade should include a daily depreciation, so you know exactly what your risk is, whether I keep this car 7 days or 70 days. You need to know not only what the market day supply is, but how long is this car been on the ground in your market. So there's a lot more data here that's going to allow you to go faster and further. Now, Brian brought up win rates.
Actually, Grant, can you go back to the last slide for a second? Can you double click on what does 24/7 automation full spectrum appraisals mean for after hours business?
I mean, it's pretty simple, right? It's the same reason why we now post prices on our cars. The last thing a customer wants to see when they're shopping at 10 o'clock at night and they're looking for a trade number is a form fill that tells them that somebody will get back to them within 24 hours. When that happens, that customer not only is going to bounce from your website, but they're going to look for that information and they will find it with a CarMax, with a Carvana, or a competitive dealer that's chosen to unlock this information. Anything you want to add there?
No, but well, I guess, yes, I do. If you are in the EV space, which Ford is a major player and it's getting stronger and stronger at this, if you're trying to conquest, let's say Hyundai Konas, and you're trying to, or Kia EV9s and Tesla Model S's and Tesla Model Ys, and you're trying to go at that business, if you're not giving a number at 11 o'clock at night on a Saturday or a Sunday or any day that you're not, operating during store hours, what we see across the Cars Commerce platform, is we have Dealer Inspire, 6,000 websites. The clients, if they don't get the information they're looking for, they bounce and they go somewhere else. So if you're the one that's providing them the answers that nobody else is, it gives you a competitive advantage. And if you don't agree with the number that we're providing, we'll write you a check and we'll guarantee it, no questions asked.
Simple, fast, easy. Earlier, you talked about the showroom, right? And the goal for showroom should be a 45% win rate. Now, there's been a lot of conversation around look to book, and we've been using that metric for years. I think it's important that we need to measure looks versus opportunities. And here's what I mean by that. You take the average car dealer selling 100 cars a month. Now, my store, I used to think was pretty good. We had about a 40% closing ratio, right? Let's say you have a 50% closing ratio. That means you have 200 guests that are in the showroom. We need to be tracking how many of those 200 guests did we appraise? How many of those 200 guests did we win a car? Because these are the type of metrics that are being used by the public non-traditional retailers like CarMax and Carvana. So simply put, if you have 100 guests that come into your showroom floor, your goal ought to be capturing 45% of those. And that leads us into the next layer, sight unseen appraisals. And for decades, we've had phone ups that have come in. where a customer says, hey, I'm 3 hours away. I'd really like to come work out this car deal. I need a number for my trade. I've got this online. I've got that online. And our salespeople, right, wrong, or otherwise, some have done a really good job. Some have done a poor job asking them, how would you rank your car between 1 to 10? What would you tell us if you were selling it to a family member? I think we need to simplify this and take it right down to a conversation that says, no problem, Mr. Customer, giving you a number on your trade is the easiest part of my job. In fact, I just texted you a link where you can self-drive an appraisal and have a guaranteed number within 2 minutes. Now, the goal for that should be 18%. Get 100 customers asking for a sight unseen. We want to buy 18 cars. Then we start talking about internet leads. Now, there is a wealth in internet leads. There's an oil reserve of customers that are looking to transact simple, fast, easy. They're looking to get a number. They're looking to sell their car. Maybe they're going to a Carvana. Maybe they're going to a Tesla. Maybe they're doing whatever. They want information. They want to transact, and they've learned to segment the buy and sell side. So your target as a store should be 15%. Then we've got our third parties, right? And these are customers that are more top funnel. They want to know what their car's worth, and they start down that journey. Set your benchmark at 8%. And then probably the biggest untapped oil reserve that we should all be spending much more time on is service drive acquisition. Now, here's the thing. Service drive acquisition is difficult. It's hard. We've tried for decades to take people out of the car that they're currently driving and put them into a similar one with little to no change to their monthly payment and no money down. The fact is, if you want to buy more cars, you need to appraise more cars. If you want to sell more cars, you need to buy more cars. So the challenge to all of you on this call is pay attention here in the next couple of minutes when we teach you and demystify service drive acquisition. But it's pretty simple. If you ask customers if you can provide them with a value, then you do. Your goal ought to be able to convert 1 out of 5 of those into an acquisition, then ultimately into a car deal.
And Grant, real quick before you go to this last number, which is the aggregate and the sum of all parts. The thing that I find the most curious is that many dealers, many of my friends, will hesitate on giving a sight unseen appraisal, or let's say a service drive appraisal. Yet they will still put a number on simulcast or some virtual auction, which we didn't used to do. And they'll look at the condition grade report, which is typically not as accurate as what a sight unseen appraisal using AccuTrade is, but they'll still put a higher number on a vehicle at the auction on a car that they haven't seen that could have mechanical issues than they will on a vehicle in their service drive. So I will just add that that's a mindset change that really needs to change. And a lot of the top performing dealers that we have that are acquiring 100, 150 or 200 or more vehicles, which we've got plenty of with AccuTrade, acquiring cars off the service drive, they're doing exactly that. They're rethinking it, and they're looking at their service drive as an auction lane and putting numbers on all the vehicles, and they're playing the law of averages.
Brian, I think there's probably every dealer on this call that does a great job with showroom appraisals, right? It's what we've been doing since we got into the car business and those before us. But as we invite more customers to do sight unseens, as we dip our toes into the internet, powering our website or participating in third-party leads, and more importantly, when we start service drive, that invites risk. It invites risk of making a mistake. It creates confusion in processes. So how do we pull all of that back together to instead of having like a routine, that we have a process? Like what does that look like?
Well, they've got to have confidence in the values, right? And I think that one of the big, I guess, missing ingredients in having confidence with the values is having confidence that if we put our best foot forward on our online sight unseen service drive appraisal, that our team at scale is going to be able to perform all the elements of an AccuTrade appraisal. And I'll use a quick analogy real quick. If everybody on this call that's running, a decent profit in their F&I department, I can remember when F&I was an option, and they were like, "Hey, why didn't you introduce that person to the finance manager?" And that's how it was back in the 90s. And then it became a mandatory thing, and then the profit went up and up and up. And I see that no dealer that executes F&I very well will allow anybody to skip the client interview. They won't allow them. Well, actually, now it's a compliance issue. You have to present a menu to 100% of the customers, 100% of the time on 100% of the transactions. So why don't we do that with appraisals? why do we lean, and some dealers do a phenomenal job, but as an industry, there's a big gap between F&I and used cars in terms of the execution of once they've done the online, we fill out an online credit application, the F&I manager is going to verify all that information, but we don't verify the condition of the vehicle overall as an industry the way that we verify all the information on a credit app before we go to the finance office. And I think that really needs to change. And the steps of an active trade appraisal should be measured, and the accountability level should be no different than it is in the finance office. And that's the difference between what we see dealers of $800 a copy, a variance between what the recon was estimated to what it actually was when it came out of the shop. And most of that can be determined and caught by doing the proper active trade appraisal. AccuTrade will measure each one of these, is it tires, by appraiser. If you have 50, 60, some stores we have 70 appraisers in one rooftop, the only way you can sit there and hold accountability at scale is to know what's my PVR evaporation on the appraisers that aren't scanning vehicles with an OBD2 sensor to make sure that I'm mitigating my risk. What about the tires? What percentage of the appraisals are we measuring tread depth on? If you're not scanning an OBD2 sensor on every one of your vehicles, overall as an industry, it's $212 per copy PVR. On tires, it's $309. Then you've got cosmetics, and you've got how many keys and the spare keys, and we can go on and on and on about this, but the recon is what's paper cutting dealers to death, and it's what causes them to get risk averse and not be able to feel comfortable competing with anybody else online, because they know that their active trade appraisal process is airtight and that 100% of the clients are going to get an active trade appraisal 100% of the time. And I think that's critical. And you're talking, close to $1,000 a copy PVR if you're not doing that. And the AccuTrade enables anybody to be able to do that with minimal training.
So would you say that regardless of your ability to get in and do service drive appraisals or do sight unseen or what have you, right? Just taking it back to the showroom floor, that the active trade appraisal is the table stakes?
It's been the price of admission since the 90s when I was at Oldsmobile appraising cars, and in 1998 at Ford, it really, in Mercury with Mercury Topazes and Ford Rangers, it hasn't changed at all since then. The only thing that's changed is our accountability towards making sure that we're accurate on these appraisals, because I think we've almost gotten too far on the technology side, and it hasn't been simple enough until now. But if you take a look at it, the power of consistency, I hear a lot of dealers, and I talk about this daily with dealers. Well, I can't compete with CarMax, or I can't compete with Carvana, or this other big aggressive, group, publicly or privately held. And really, here's the ingredients of what it comes down to. It's not necessarily the numbers they're putting on the car. You got to ask yourself, consistent online and sight unseen appraisal process. CarMax 100% of the time, Carvana 100% of the time. Then you got to ask yourself, what percentage of the time does that happen at my dealership? Do 100% of all the appraisals get entered in the system? And I'm not talking about just showroom. I'm talking about website, sight unseen, service drive. Any time that somebody's talking about a trade value, or is a member of your dealership getting on to one of the third-party websites to be able to get a number and just telling the client that, or giving them some sort of range, or are they directing them to get a number from somebody else who is aggressive at that and bring it in and we'll match it? My thought process, and I know Grant, your thought process is you got to go on offense. You've got to set the tone so that everybody else is following you, not the other way around. If you provide that aggressive number online to set the appointment to get the client to arrive, are you confident that you're going to have a consistent physical vehicle evaluation in store 100% of the time with 100% of the clients? With CarMax, Carvana, the answer is yes. And you see where we're going with this. This is why they're able to provide more aggressive numbers online, because they're going to be tighter. And I know that some people on this call are going to say, well, no, Carvana, they didn't used to do it. No, they're doing OBD2 scans now, and they've gotten a lot better. The recon process is a lot tighter, and operationally, that's why their profitability per car just keeps getting stronger and stronger. Understanding the best end user on day one, that's a whole nother conversation that we'll talk about here in a minute, but the goal should be to acquire everything and then determine what's the exit strategy? And I see so many dealers that are determining the exit strategy before they've even looked at the car and determining that they have to retail the car, whereas everybody else that they're competing with are not necessarily looking at that, and they're missing a huge opportunity. And I skipped consistent vehicle or value or consistent value evaluation. So what's the range between the appraisal value between 4 different used car managers in a dealership? Is it 4,000, 5,000? Sometimes I see 6,000, 7,000. Or is everybody using the same type of recon estimate for a front fender on a, let's say, a Bronco? I just recently had somebody rear me in my Bronco, and I didn't know that the tailgate was $2,000 and that the cradle for the spare tire was that much more. AccuTrade will tell you exactly what every single panel is, so you don't have to realize the difference between a Bronco or a Corolla. It's all level set. And if there's bumper sensors and sonar bumpers, and we take that all into consideration, heads up displays in the windshield, and most importantly and last is consistent follow-up, shoulder to shoulder ongoing training with inspection and accountability. To be able to reference one single third-party neutral source that's guaranteed, check writer, CarMax, Carvana, they do it every single time. So when you add up all of these different ingredients, I think that, you know, as a dealer, I wouldn't be able to say that we did all these things 100% of the time with 100% of the customers. That's the difference. The level of your execution of consistency and adherence to principle, you know, standard over time, reliability, dependability, consistency, that's the key from 2024 and beyond.
All right, so just tying back what we've talked about the last few minutes, if we want to sell more cars, we need to buy more cars. If we want to buy more cars, we need to appraise more cars. If we don't do a walk around, right, we're going to make mistakes. So that's the price of admission. Then when we talk about consistency, the next layer of this is really values, right? So it's having the confidence to know that you're putting a best-in-class number in front of the customer. And as Brian alluded to earlier, when you use AccuTrade, we are a check writer. We are a backstop partner on every single car, whether it has a check engine light on or it needs tires. We're here to back you up. So that's the confidence that you need to move further. Now, it's been quoted publicly that we have the most accurate used car pricing in the industry. It's the right price on the right car every time with a check. Now, just recently, Wall Street investment firm BTIG found that Cars.com and by proxy AccuTrade had the highest offer 56% of the time compared to CarMax, Carvana, and Car Gurus. And that's actually up from last year. So when you're a partner with us, you know that you're putting your best foot forward day one, 100% of the time with 100% of the vehicles. Now, how do we get there? It's important to understand that we're not just looking at a traditional legacy MMR number where cars have sold at the auction. In fact, our values take into consideration vehicle pedigree, so color, equipment, options, right? Takes into consideration the tires, the brakes, the mechanical, all of that factored in. But more importantly, we're checking the wholesale channel every single day with a team of pricing analysts that are watching the live bidding performance, not just when the hammer drops. We're looking to see when the hands go up and the hands go down and connecting it back to that specific vehicle. Then you layer in the OBD technology and you understand what your mechanical loss potential is, and you've got an accurate number that you can present to the customer with confidence via our universal condition report. But it starts with fishing with a better fishing pole, right? Then doing what we do, which is the active trade appraisal, then presenting numbers to ultimately win more deals. Now, if we don't spend much time on values, I think it is important that we land here. Our final price has the lowest standard deviation to what a car brings at auction. So not only is it the most aggressive up front, but it's also the closest to what the cars actually bring in the lane. So now you have the confidence to move quickly and appraise more vehicles, underwriting your risk with our guarantee, and understanding your full reconditioning estimate on that car. The next step, as Brian mentioned, is that best end user. Let's talk about that.
And one other thing I want to pin down on what you were just saying, Graham. In order to get to the value the quickest, you've also got to remove the friction for the team and how they're using the tool. So just for all the Ford dealers that are on here, before I get into these specific Ford values, We're fully integrated with AutoFi and eLead from an integration standpoint, so that you don't have to change your process, your technology, or anything like that. We're fully embedded into that entire process from start to finish, or able to be. So in this instance, I'm going to talk about a tale of two F-150s. And I know that all the Ford dealers and Lincoln dealers on this call can definitely appreciate this. Ford F-150s are not all built the same. And although average auction values might say, well, average MMR is this, and this is this, and we're going to use a guidebook, we all know, those of us that have been Ford dealers or are Ford dealers, that there's a big difference between, let's say, that white F-150 that's loaded with all the equipment and the burgundy F-150 to the right of it that may not have all the equipment, even if the miles are the same. So we're going to take a quick breakdown here. This is an AccuTrade appraisal of a 2023 F-150 crew cab with 22,000 miles. It's an XLT actually it defaults to a V8, but it's actually this one is a 2.7 liter V6 EcoBoost with 20-inch alloy wheels, 4-wheel drive, dual moonroof, heated seats, trailer backup assist, and navigation. Pearl white exterior, you can see that we add more for the pearl white. There's more demand for it with a black interior. Now this vehicle, we're going to appraise it at $39,475. You can see that's much higher than what the Manheim average is for that vehicle. JD Power is going to be at 36.4 and KBB is at 34.6. Now, obviously, it's all subjective. The one thing I'll emphasize is that 39,475, we're a check writer at that number. Now, a lot of people say, well, what's the big difference between the two cars? Well, take a look at your aged inventory to see how many cars have above average miles, not ideal color, not ideal options, or a bad vehicle history report, or VHR. And now let's put these two side by side to see the difference on how AccuTrade evaluates an F-150 that's a high demand F-150 build versus maybe a low to medium demand F-150 build when it comes to appraising the vehicles. And if you think about when somebody says, well, you know, XYZ dealer is putting way too much, putting crazy money in the car. Well, sometimes dealers say that about us, but yes, we are going to put crazy money in that pearl white, low market days supply, low days on market vehicle. And we're going to make sure that we're winning that car because that's a high margin item. And it's really not so much what's my PVR or, you know, all those things. It's how many of these cars can you acquire and retail out of. And when Grant's saying in order to sell more, you need to appraise more, you're not going to win these trades unless you're appraising more. You're not going to win these trades unless you're being competitive with the other players that are providing numbers on these vehicles. So let's we just went over the numbers of the vehicle on the left. Let's go over the numbers on the vehicle on the right. So this is the burgundy exterior. So you see there's a little bit of a deduction due to the color. The miles, it's going to be, you know, it's a wash, but it doesn't have all the value impacting options of the vehicle on the left. So now, same miles, same year, same trim, but it doesn't have nav, it doesn't have 4-wheel drive, it doesn't have a dual moonroof, it doesn't have heated seats, it doesn't have the trailer backup assist. The difference between the one on the left and the one on the right is $6,100, no, $8,100. Or $7,900. The difference is this vehicle on the left, if you have 100 of those going through the auction, there's going to be 100 of those that sell before the one on the right, the first one sells. It just doesn't have the same demand. But here's the most telling thing. We use the full 17-digit VIN and sometimes and then some to determine the pedigree of this vehicle. You'll notice in both instances, our numbers change, but the other guidebooks don't change. Why? Because they're using an average number that doesn't take into effect value impacting options. This is one of the most powerful aspects of AccuTrade. It's one of the reasons why when I was a retailer, we appraised 50,000 cars with it. It increased by 8-digit amounts of gross profit by using it on that many appraisals. And we didn't realize what an untapped, like Grant just said, an oil reserve of profit there was. Before we were averaging everything out. We weren't putting enough money in the cars on the left, and we were over appraising the cars on the right. Because if you take average, you can see that you would under appraise the white exterior vehicle and you would over appraise the burgundy exterior vehicle. This is how we help dealers to prevent aging from day one.
Talk a little bit about our methodology here. Best end user.
So from a best end user standpoint, and this is my personal Bronco. Now, do I like how much it's depreciated here recently? I don't. But you know what? It's not anything that I can control. It's the market. You know, I've got this wild track that I bought from one of my best friends up in Columbus, and it has depreciated, especially since July, thousands of dollars. But that's the market, and I should have seen it coming with the days on market, with the market day supply. Even though I feel it's a good color with good miles and the right equipment, there's still a lot of them out there, and I saw this coming and I didn't trade out of it quick enough. So if you take a look at our scorecard on the right-hand side, it's now leveled off, but the market day supply is still a little bit high, you know, at 64. But it's becoming more stable because the local days on market, which is days to sale basically, is 40. Now, if I want to keep it or I don't want to keep it, the reality of it is it's depreciating $1,000 a month, whether I like it or not. And if a dealer has this on their lot every 30 days, that's what you can expect in terms of gross evaporation. So when we're looking at this, or what as a dealer is looking at how quickly they can get out of this vehicle, obviously you've got to factor in how many days it's going to take you to sell it. And we're going to provide the daily depreciation. One other thing that we're also going to provide, as you can see on the 44 number in the yellow, right above the target retail in the middle of the screen, that's the cars.com scarcity index. That's sourced from 28 million unique visitors on the cars.com website. So we're integrating different pieces of data to help dealers make smarter decisions based on all the information that we have across the Cars Commerce platform.
So for a dealer looking at this, Brian, and maybe they say, hey, I've got a ton of Broncos right now. I don't need any more of them. We've got our guarantee, we've got our target auction, we've got our MMR, so we have a full snapshot. And should we decide to keep this car, we have a recommendation of how long it will take to sell and how much it could decline in value along the way. We understand the condition of the car. We understand the market dynamics. I think the next piece is really, how do we have that conversation with the guest, and how do we decide where the market's at?
So on this screen, you can see on the left-hand side, this is what we call our used vehicle condition report. We built this to model what customers are used to seeing in an MPI in the service department. Now, it's going to be red, yellow, green. In this case, I've got everything caught up, but if I'm deducting the tires or anything like that, it's going to say yellow or red. So what it allows you to do is when you're justifying, you know, why the vehicle's worth $43,000, there's a couple different ways to do it. You can either explain to somebody, hey, you know, if you want $46,000 for it, you're going to have less miles in my case, or I'm going to have to remove the bad vehicle history report, which somebody rear-ended me and I can't control that. But that's just the reality of it, because the next person that's buying it or looking for it, the dealer that's trying to sell it, is going to get half the SRPs of a dealer that doesn't have a bad vehicle condition report. On the right-hand side, you can see very clearly after May of 2024, right there in July, I can tell you exactly what it was, because I saw that the day supply was in the hundreds. And just like everybody else, I'm optimistic that something's going to work out, but ultimately the bubble burst and you can see it right there. So as you're explaining this to a client, you can actually, this is a Raptor, it's not my specific vehicle, and Raptors have dropped off the end here recently. But you can actually show clients, yeah, if you would have traded it in there, yeah, it was worth, you know, a lot more than what it's worth right now. But you can explain to somebody, they go, well, used cars are worth more than they've ever been worth in history. Yeah, they were, and this is what it was worth then, but it looks like it's going down and it's not getting better. So right now is a better time to trade. But you can actually go back in time, like John Madden on a telestrator on Monday morning, and go back and see exactly when that happened and almost tell them when they could have predicted the future and still help them do that today.
Brian, we had this conversation Saturday morning on Clubhouse, and there were a ton of Ford dealers in the room, and one of them brought up a GMC Hummer, and then it naturally progressed into, you know, the Bronco Raptor conversation. Went for over an hour talking about the market changes here, and maybe just spend a couple of minutes here on this Bronco Raptor and just the economy of this car today.
Right. So for all the Ford Lincoln dealers on this call, you know that it wasn't very long ago that you could have sold a 2023 Bronco for $10,000 over MSRP, even when the MSRP was whatever it was, $9,000 more than a 2024. But as Ford wants to remain competitive, they lower the price of the 2024s. It's coming back down. That's obviously going to affect the prices of the 2023. But what it's also affecting here recently is the demand. As interest rates go up, supply is still there for multiple reasons. The Raptors are not as hot as they were 6 months or 12 months ago. I'm in love with a Raptor. Actually, this is one of my dream vehicles. And I had no idea that the market day supply was as high as it was, or the days on market. Now, I am in here doing this most every day, but I'm also looking at what's the monthly depreciation. And at this moment in time, it'll probably be different in 2 weeks, but there's a lot of risk in this vehicle. So as you're taking this vehicle in, I think it's important to know not just what it's worth today, but what it's going to be worth. This car, if you're not this truck, if you're not very aggressive with it, it might take a minute to sell this vehicle because the scarcity and the demand is not what it was a month or two ago. Now, a vehicle like this that has the right color, the right equipment, the right miles, this has all the right stuff to it. But if you have a 60-day turn policy and it has 180 market day supply, is this a vehicle you should price at 100% of market? Or more interestingly enough, if we go to the next slide, Graham, what if all the Ford dealers know what a Ford's worth, obviously, and you guys know this inside and out, but do you know the nuances of a GMC Hummer or the Cadillac XTS lease programs that were announced recently, or the Mercedes-Benz, somebody's trading in a GLE 350, that it's approaching the end of the quarter, and all the Mercedes-Benz dealers need to hit their C3 objectives. So the cars are worth, abnormally more than what they normally are because they're going to CPO them, and there's some other incentives that go to the front end of that deal if they certify enough vehicles. There's other factors like this with off brands that maybe are non-Ford vehicles, like this GMC Hummer. You can see the market day supply is high, the days on market is high. One thing that we don't share is proprietary is we're also tracking, more importantly than what did sell, what didn't sell, and what did it not sell for. And that's how we come up with all the metrics, including the depreciation, as we're forecasting that out. So one of the huge things that we do is we try to help dealers avoid risk or avoid potential accidents so that you at least have all the data to make an intelligent decision. Should you retail this vehicle? Are you the best end user for a vehicle like this? And that's for the dealer to determine.
Brian, spend just a second talking about the dichotomy between 147 days on market and 103-day market day supply. I think that's really important as we start looking at excessive depreciation in a declining market where there still might be an opportunity with this vehicle. So tell us what you see when you look at that.
So there's certain dealers that are really that are known for selling these vehicles, and people are going to them. So when you see 147 days on market, that might not be at this particular dealer. This particular vehicle might have been at 3 different dealers, and it aged out at 60, and then it got wholesaled, then it aged out there at 60. But there's not a lot of transactions, as you can see from the Manheim numbers remaining stable. They're just not selling. So nobody has gone below the hard deck and tried and retailed one of these vehicles for a loss because they can still take it to the auction and it becomes a professional wholesale vehicle. Our technology will show dealers that not just on their own product, but on all product. And it's not that anybody can't sell this vehicle, but you've got to be aware of whether or not you're the best end user. And there's some dealers that are phenomenal used EV dealers, and they sell Cybertrucks and different Tesla models and GMC Hummers, but they know how to market them. They have switch vehicles. Their salespeople are very well tuned into it. No differently than a dealer that handles subprime has a finance department that's set up for that. They've got the salespeople that can provide switch vehicles. They've got the right marketing strategy. When you're the best end user, you've got all those things in line. And it's no different than if the biggest auto retailers go to the auction. If they were the best end user for everything, they would leave their hand up and they would buy every single vehicle at the auction that day. But they don't. They buy certain vehicles and they don't buy other vehicles.
So the other part that I find interesting here is the target auction guidance represents the best end user. The best end user that you referenced, that EV specialist, is willing to pay $86,450 for this car despite an average MMR of 85.1, yet the market is telling us that these don't sell quickly. So it's important to understand what your swim lane is. What are the cars that you're really, really good at? And if you're not good at selling it, who is, and how do you get the car to them and maximize your profit? Acquire it
And let me,
between instant offer and target auction and move.
and here's the dynamic between those two to double click on that. Instant offer of 82.6 versus 86.450. 82.6 is designed to be like a first pencil strategy so that you can enable and empower multiple acquisition specialists on the service side to be able to acquire vehicles, and then eventually to other parts of your business. In order to go to target auction, that's the decision of a used car manager, a GSM, a GM, to be able to have those lanes, the swim lanes, because you want to be able to get numbers to somebody quickly, no differently than on your e-com internet team. You got to do the same thing with trades. And then if you need to go further, you need further investigation or a more difficult decision to get closer to target auction, then you get more heads involved. And that's how the best performers that we work with do it. And along those lines, let's say that you are the best end user, you're not the best end user for a certain vehicle. Here's a couple ways that I look at it. This is a recent car dealership guy post on Twitter X that's showing all the 0% interest rates. I don't know if every dealer on this call realizes what has 0%, what doesn't, what just did. Does every Chevrolet dealer know that Ford Mach-E's have 0% for 72 months? Are they baking that into their appraisals as they're doing that? What about the lease specials that came out recently for BZ4X? Or for all of these vehicles that we have on this list on the right-hand side, that's basically a list of some of the toughest cars to appraise. So let's talk about what AccuTrade does that nobody else does. We put guaranteed numbers on in an automated way on 98.5% of all the vehicles on the left. 100,000 plus vehicles, 100,000 plus mileage vehicles, $100,000 plus vehicles, including exotics. Electric vehicles, more numbers on electric vehicles than anybody else in the industry. Vehicles with a bad VHR, excluding salvage vehicles, but we will still guarantee a salvage vehicle. You just need to call our team for support on that. We place an automated number on 98.5% of the vehicles, including 2024 current model year vehicles. So one layer deeper on this, when Jim Farley announced that he was going to lower the MSRP on the Ford Lightning to be more competitive with Tesla, we had those values updated in an hour. So we're protecting all the Ford dealers that we had that were appraising a car 60 minutes later. We're protected because it's our money as well. So we're updating that stuff in real time. We don't have to wait for the transactional data to come through for a lag measure in order to update. And it's not just on Ford Lightnings. It's on Tesla Model S's, Tesla Model 3s. It's on Ford GTs. Maybe you can talk about this story, Grant.
Yeah, real quick for those with us, we had a dealer that was appraising a 21 Ford GT and didn't know if it was heads or tails, didn't know what to do. Hopped onto our chat function, went right to one of our pricing analysts, and sight unseen with a few photos and an OBD scan, got a check in hand for $850,000. Now, I don't know about you, but my owners that I worked with weren't going to let me buy an $850,000 car, right? So this is the confidence that you need to be able to exit that vehicle. Now, we've talked about a lot here today, and I think we're nearing the finish line, and probably the greatest area of opportunity is service drive acquisition. That's what every dealer I talk to nationwide wants to learn more about. So we prepared some information for you today to talk about exactly what the most successful dealers are doing to acquire cars at scale. So Brian, talk us through what we need to do before we get into the drive and start appraising cars. What's important to set the stage?
So first of all, you got to have a champion. You got to determine what's the head count, what's the budget, what technology do I need? Obviously, I'm biased towards AccuTrade, but you've got to figure out, most people don't want to spend a bunch of money without being able to have tangible results immediately. You got to review the CRM, text template cadence in the CRM. You've got to have a split deal policy clarified. You got to have role clarity with the service department so that they're not interfering with taking away profit from the service department or alienating the service advisors. And then you've got to have the daily responsibility of that champion. How are you going to measure success? What are the spiffs and pay plan? Are they tied to accountability and performance? And then you got to gain alignment and commitment from stakeholders across the board.
Let's take a look at what that success piece looks like, because I know everybody's focused. Okay, we do all this. What are we going to get?
So we'll use a store that has 3,000 customer pay repair orders. And whatever your number is, you can insert it there, 1,000, 2,000. The goal for every dealer should be to appraise 15% of those vehicles. And I'm not talking about just laying a piece of paper on the seat and hoping for the best. I'm talking about, we'll talk about the word track here in a second, face-to-face interaction, asking the client if they're interested or not. If you appraise 15% of those, that's 450 appraisals. 20% should be the expected win rate. 90 acquisitions of low market day supply, low days on market, high margin used vehicles that are going to drive traffic, SRPs, VDPs, and they're not going to age out on you. Now, how many people do you need to do this? You're going to need, at 75 appraisals per associate, very similar to handling internet leads, you're going to need six headcount. Now, how do you pay them?
Yeah, and with that is no auction fees, no transport, no deal shield, no arbitration.
Increased service retention.
And the clock starts today, not a week from now. So can you mentioned 6.3 headcount, right? And everybody's saying, I don't have 6 people. I'm just gonna have my used car manager do that. I think we all know that that's problematic. So talk to us about why decentralization matters.
Because there's only so many appraisals that a used car manager can do accurately. We're asking our used car managers to do way too many things. Make taillight calls, approve reconditioning, confirm appointments, call no-shows, do one-on-ones, run ad campaigns to hire, train, onboard, one-on-ones. I mean, it's just a lot. And then you've got 5 or 6 people waiting all day long for all the virtual appraisals for all their internet leads. So the pinch point in the middle is the used car manager. If you really want to decentralize and expand and double, triple, quadruple your appraisal count, you've got to go with decentralized, and you've got to enable more people to do the first 90% of an appraisal, similar to how they do with a credit application or anything else.
So we put technology in their hands. We give them the license to go out and start the appraisal process. Obviously, the desk is going to confirm and verify and put the final number on it. But I think if we're going to do that, right, we need to be able to track these associates and make sure that they're doing the job correctly.
So we've got a dashboard that does that. And it says it in the upper right-hand corner, but there's a big difference between delegating authority and delegating tasks. And I think this is where a lot of used car managers are like, I don't know if I feel like letting somebody do that. Well, do you really want to stick tires on every single vehicle? Do you really want to scan an OBD on every single vehicle and go out and check the mileage and all these things that we could delegate? It's not about delegating authority or your job. It's about delegating tasks, and then you're working on the business instead of in the business. And this is what it looks like at the end. And you can see the amount of increased appraisals this particular dealership. And then we measure what percentage of them were scanned, what about the photos, color selected, tread depth, and then appraisal 1 by appraiser. And what we find is that when you let go and let more people participate in that the appraisals become significantly more accurate and there's less mistakes.
So let's talk about the process, right? Earlier we brought up, hey, if I could put you in the same car with little to no money down and a similar payment, you'd want to do it, right? I think we all know that over the last few years, we've done a great job of selling customers cars that we had in stock, not necessarily what they wanted, right? And we know that these equity signals are smaller than ever. So how do we change our process from, vehicle exchange to vehicle acquisition?
We've got to move the appraisal up further into the process. What you can't do is you can't expect, and I was guilty of this when I was a retailer, to try to find selection, and then once you get somebody landed on a vehicle that's in stock, then go out and appraise the vehicle. If you tell the client you want to buy their vehicle, it's got to be the focal point, and it's got to be done further up in the process. And then once you do get closure on the trade appraisal, that you'll buy the vehicle whether they buy one from you or not, then you go after the replacement vehicle selection. If you don't do that and you use the standard process on the left, the oil change is going to be done before you even get to the appraisal, and everybody's going to say, this doesn't work. We're going to go away from this and do something else.
So Brian, what does the data tell us around the customers that we work with in the service lane? When we buy their car, how many of them are in turn going to buy or lease from us again?
85%. 85% of the vehicles you buy will buy another vehicle from you using this process.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, let's communicate that we want to buy their car, whether they want to buy one from us or not. Let's move the appraisal up. Let's empower our people to do that, because the net result is 85% of the ones we buy are going to buy again. So that's kind of a given, right?
Just like on the internet deal, you've got to be flexible with your process. You don't have the same road to the sale online as you do in the showroom, and it's the same way here.
So let's talk about the two facets, right? Obviously, we've got the active appraisal part down, but with Service Drive, there's some things that need to happen both before and after the appointment, and then during the appointment. So why don't you walk us through the decision tree of approaching a guest?
So instead of pre-qualifying somebody by asking what do they owe, what are their payments, because we find that more than half the clients end up getting a vehicle different than what they pulled up in off the Service Drive that do convert. We make it very, very simple. Greet the client. This is how we're able to hire even people outside of automotive. And we just ask them, would it be okay if I made you an offer on your vehicle while you wait? And if they say no, or not right now, no problem. Here's my business card. We're always looking for vehicles like yours for used vehicle inventory. There's a shortage. Whenever you get closer to replacing it, please call me first. And that's it. There's no, and that's how you don't alienate the service department. If they say how much, because they don't normally say yes, how much, then you just proceed with the AccuTrade appraisal. And it's so simple. There's not any slick word tracks or anything that's complicated. So it allows you to upskill new hires so much more quickly. And that's actually what we see. Those are the type of people that thrive. People in the hospitality industry, from restaurants, hotels, are typically the best at doing this.
But it's not about selling them a car. It's about experience. So, all right, so we've got this down. We're in the waiting room. We figured this out. What do we do before and after?
So before, in a perfect world, we're calling them up the day ahead of time. The CRM is going to show you who's coming in the following day, and you just ask them if they'd be interested in replacing or selling their vehicle. Once it's closed out, because you'll have an acquisition champion, the champion is sending out a follow-up email from the CRM, so you don't have to go into all these multiple systems. We work closely with all the major CRMs to try to keep all that information in the same place, so you don't have to look in all these multiple systems to see what the follow-up was. And it's very simple. We need your vehicle that you recently serviced with us, your make model. Was a member of my team able to provide you with a cash offer during your visit? Please let me know either way by texting or calling me, or click here for your appraisal value. And that's, so the whole theme of this is simplicity and execution. Nothing complicated.
So one key takeaway that I think every dealer on this call can do is this template. If you want to see what the appetite for Service Drive acquisition is, send this template to every single customer that has a closed customer pay and warranty RO over the next week, and put your used car manager's email and phone number in there, and watch that voicemail box light up and that email fill up. Customers will be telling you, no, I didn't get a number. Yes, I'm interested. The appetite is there. The business is there. We just need to find a way to get to it.
The dealer that's listed on this template acquired over 200 cars last month, and they're going to exceed that this month off the Service Drive.
Now, some of our most progressive dealers have taken the QR codes out of the email templates and actually put them in practice around the dealership. So whether it's, an image of the owner or it's table toppers, the way you communicate to your customers that you're interested in providing an experience matters. Let them know at every opportunity, at every touch point, that we're here to provide a number, and make it easy where they can go with an associate or they can self-drive themselves. Because again, at the end of the day, in order to sell more cars, we need to buy more cars. In order to buy more cars, we need to appraise more cars. And then at the end, we talked about consistency and cadence of accountability and analytics. Just keep a scoreboard, track your people. Brian, anything you want to add here?
No, I know we're kind of coming up on time, so
yeah, we can help all of you build all of these out. Yep. And then, really the 4 key disciplines: keep a scoreboard, right? Let people know what we're doing. Review the lead measures. How many cars did we actually look at today? How many customers did we talk to? And then the lag measure, how many cars did we acquire? And really, at the end of the day, accountability is everything, right? We get our process in writing, we get our people trained up, we inspect what we expect, and we have daily checkouts with our team to make sure that we're doing the right job.
And that's what your trade row is going to look like with those ingredients.
Yeah, that was a big weekend for you. Now, we've talked about it a lot here today. We've talked about what to do online. We've talked about what to do in the service drive on the showroom floor, but really what AccuTrade does is it's making your life simple. We're going to consolidate 7 different facets of your business into one solution that works with your people, starting with powering your website, with a best-in-class consumer-focused experience that drives opportunities. Then being your backstop partner with our instant offer guarantees. Leveraging our expertise to help you stand up that physical buying center that we all know is so important. Develop a service drive acquisition strategy, participate in your sight unseen appraisals, and give you a competitive advantage on Dealer Row. Last but not least, we work in conjunction with the Cars.com marketplace to deliver you tailored opportunities that go to one dealer from customers that want to sell a car that you want to buy. And then finally, working with the tools that you already have. If you have any questions, you can feel free to scan this QR code. It will bring you to either myself or a member of my team. You can call or email me directly. And with that, I think we've got a couple of minutes for questions.
So what do they have to do, Grant? Just put it in the chat?
Yep, there's a question box down at the bottom. Looks like Patrick wants to have the slides sent out. Yeah, we will circulate these with the team at the shop and FordDirect to get those out to you. Great question. What else do we have for the crew?
Grant, I see Patrick has, can we please get the win rate? Did you already answer that one?
Yep, we'll get Patrick taken care of.
And that'll be included in the slide deck. Carmelo. Carmelo runs a hell of an operation. Thanks for coming, Carmelo. Nobody has any questions about service drive acquisition? It's typically like the, I don't know, the Holy Grail or the Fountain of Youth. But looks like
I don't see anything else coming over. It looks like
Yeah, it looks like Thomas has his hand raised. I don't know if that's on purpose, but we see you, Thomas. If you have a question, feel free to ask it if you're able to come off mute or drop it in the chat for us.
I think he said oops. He might not have meant to. He said, hey there, and oops.
Okay, well, hi.
so Patrick, it does sync up via ADF XML.
all right. I think we're good. We'll get everybody some time back in their day.
Thanks so much for everybody for attending.
Thank you, guys.